Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the New York City Council hearing on the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. At this time, please silence all electronics and do not approach the dais. If you have any assistance, please contact the sergeant and we will kindly assist you. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, you may begin.
Good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. I'm City Councilmember Keith Powers, Chair of the committee. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the other members of this committee who are present. We're joined by Councilmember Justin Brannan from Brooklyn. I believe we're joined by Councilmember Diana Ayala online, and Councilmember Brooks Powers online as well, and we'll announce others as they join us. I want to acknowledge the Committee Counsel Jeff Campagna and the committee staff that work on the appointments that were here today. Chief Ethics Counsel Pearl Moore, Director of Investigations Francesca Della Vecchia, and Deputy Director of Investigations Alicia Vassell. Thank you always to all of them for their great work. Today we'll be holding a public hearing on 3 nominations for appointment and designation. We'll be considering the nomination of Lauren Stossel for appointment by the Council to serve as member of the New York City Board of Corrections, the proposed designation by the Council of Patricia Morthone for appointment by the Mayor as Director of the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, and the Public Advocate's request for Council's advice and consent in connection with his nomination of Leah Goodridge for reappointment as a member of the City Planning Commission. Each candidate will be invited to make an opening statement before we move on to member questions. After all candidates have appeared, we will hear public testimony. Our first public hearing will be on the nomination of Laura Stossel for appointment by the Council as a member of the New York City Board of Corrections. You may join us here at the dais. And I wanted to just congratulate all 3 on their appointments and reappointment, nomination to reappointment. The Board of Corrections, established by Section 626 of the New York City Charter, is responsible for the inspection and visitation at any time of all institutions and facilities under the jurisdiction of the Department of Correction, as well as the evaluation of DOC performance. BOC must establish minimum standards for the care, custody, correction, treatment, supervision, and discipline of all persons held or confined under the jurisdiction of the department. And it shall promulgate such minimum standards and rules and regulations after giving the mayor and commissioner an opportunity to review and comment on the proposed standards, amendments, or additions to such standards. The BOC consists of 9 members, 3 appointed by the mayor, 3 by the council, and 3 by the mayor on nomination jointly by the presiding justices of the Appellate Division of the Supreme Court for the advice of for the first and second judicial departments. Appointments are made by 3 respective appointing authorities on a rotating basis to fill any vacancy. The chairman of the board is designated by the mayor from its members. We're joined by Councilmember Farias as well. Welcome. These members are appointed for 6-year terms with vacancies filled for the remainder of the unexpired term. The BOC may appoint an executive director to serve at its pleasure with such duties and responsibilities as the board may assign, and other professional, clerical, and support personnel within appropriations for such purpose. The BOC is required to establish procedures for the hearings of grievances, complaints, or requests for assistance by or on behalf of any person held or confined under the jurisdiction of the department or by any employee of the department. BOC also issues a report at least every 3 years on issues related to the department's grievance process. Such reports must incorporate direct feedback from incarcerated individuals and proposed recommendations for relevant improvements, and include a section of recommendations on how to improve the grievance process for vulnerable populations, including incarcerated individuals who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and gender nonconforming. Such report must be submitted to the council and posted on the board's website. If appointed by the council, Lauren Stossel will be eligible to serve the remainder of a 6-year term ending on February 1, 2029. Welcome and congratulations. Please raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and in answer to all council member questions? Thank you.
I think your microphone on.
Is that working?
You got it. Thanks so much. You may offer testimony. We'll ask questions afterwards, but you may give an opening statement.
Good morning, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Lauren Stossel. I'm a forensic and clinical psychiatrist. I am honored to be considered for appointment to the New York City Board of Correction. I spent much of the last decade caring for mentally ill individuals working their way through New York City's complex legal system. In 2015, I was the first psychiatric resident to complete an elective rotation with Correctional Health Services, the agency that provides health care to detainees in the New York City jail system. I spent much of my final year of residency providing medication management and psychotherapy to individuals with serious mental illness on one of Rikers Island's first specialty mental health units. I went on to complete a forensic psychiatry fellowship at NYU, where I learned about the core issues at the interface between mental health treatment and the criminal legal system in New York City. After completing my fellowship, I joined CHS as a supervising psychiatrist on CAPS, a specialized housing unit for individuals with serious mental illness who commit violent infractions in the jail setting. For the next 6 years, I worked for CHS in a variety of capacities, including as a senior psychiatrist in general population clinics and specialty therapeutic housing units, providing psychiatric care and supervising other providers. As director of psychiatric education, developing a training program for psychiatric prescribers from a variety of disciplines, as medical director for mental health, overseeing the prescriber service, and most recently as chief of mental health, overseeing the provision of mental health care throughout the jail system, and working with CHS and DOC leadership and oversight stakeholders to advance care standards. I worked at Rikers through some of the most turbulent years in its recent history, during which we managed the COVID pandemic, a sharp rise in in-custody deaths, including suicides and overdoses, and critical staffing shortages in custody and health services. In my clinical work, I provided direct psychiatric care to patients managing complex trauma, severe mental illness, and the psychological effects of confinement, all while navigating an incredibly complex maze of legal variables between arrest and adjudication. As an administrator, I worked to implement structural changes aimed at improving access to care, strengthening suicide prevention protocols, and promoting interagency coordination. I have witnessed firsthand the violence and despair that catalyzed the Close Rikers movement. I have also witnessed the ways that effective, strong, and competent leadership and thoughtful, data-driven policy and practice can improve health outcomes and promote dignity in an extremely difficult place. I have seen the enormous impact changes in policy have for those who live and work on Rikers Island. As such, I cannot imagine a more serious responsibility than that of the Board of Correction. Their independent, comprehensive oversight and ability to ensure thorough transparency and accountability are essential in safeguarding the human rights of individuals in custody. As a member of the board, my clinical experience and awareness of the realities on the ground would afford me a rare degree of insight in interpreting data, reviewing conditions, and making recommendations for change. I am deeply committed to accountability and reform in the New York City jail system and to the health, safety, and dignity of my former patients and colleagues. I am honored and grateful for the trust you have placed in me in considering me for this position, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, and thank you for your service as well, and tough challenge, of course. Could you just talk to us why you want to serve on the Board of Corrections?
Yeah, I think transparency, accountability, and humane treatment in our jail system is just one of the most important things to me. In my work with CHS, I was working in direct service and policy development, and I think being able to serve on the board would really allow me to work towards promoting solutions that prioritize safety and autonomy and stability, and just have crucial oversight to be able to advocate for meaningful improvements in jail conditions in the city.
Thanks. And in your experience working inside of our city jails, can you talk to us what, especially on the mental health needs, what you see as the today are the biggest challenges inside of our city jails, and potentially how you might on the board use your power to help resolve those?
I think jail is one of the worst places to be if you're mentally ill. I think really people who have serious mental illness, who commit crimes, ideally should be in other settings where treatment is prioritized. So, you know, that was something that was really outside the scope of what I was doing when I was at CHS, but would be something that I would want to continue to advocate for. I think there is a lot more that we could be doing within the jail system now to make sure that people with serious mental illness are getting more treatment and are housed in areas where their access to treatment is improved. And I think there's also a lot that we can do to make jail in general an environment that is less likely to create de novo mental illness in people who are not coming in with serious mental illness, just to make it a place that is less violent and more respectful and encourages people to act in ways that are sort of in keeping with their best selves, rather than reacting to daily trauma.
When you talked about some ways that we can make sure that people have easier access to mental health care and improve on it, can you give more specifics?
Yeah, so I think the PACE program works really well at Rikers. That's Program for Accelerated Clinical Effectiveness, and it cohorts our sickest individuals in environments that are meant to more closely approximate a hospital level of care. So wide open spaces, places where people can go to be by themselves when they want to, but generally sort of reducing lock-in time, presence of supportive individuals who can help with sort of daily crises that arise, more flexible medication management schedules so that medications, if they're not taken at the time that they're generally offered, can be held and offered again later. And ideally, although this wasn't happening when I was there toward the end, steady officers who know the individuals well and really at its best can help so much with those de-escalations and really partner with mental health staff to create an environment that feels therapeutic and respectful. And I think being able to expand that program and also expand the mental health housing footprint generally for individuals who may not have serious mental illness, but who do have sort of unique mental health needs, and targeting, cohorting individuals and targeting programming and housing units towards those needs has demonstrated itself to be really effective, and I think we could be doing more of that.
Well, you say that there's not steady staffing around officers right now. You're talking about having like the consistent same people who are there, who understand the challenges in there. And why is that not happening today?
When I left CHS in 2023, there were not enough officers on those units. So, we had sort of an escalation program where if there were 2 officers or fewer, there's supposed to be 3 at least. If there were 2 officers or fewer on any of those units, we would try to escalate, and DOC would do their best to, scramble and get officers for those units. But the staffing shortage made it really challenging, and I think, I do think in many ways those posts are covetable because those units tend to be safer, and there's a real sort of camaraderie, and those groups work really well together. I think my understanding is that it was a staffing issue, but I think certainly something that DOC wanted to work towards.
Got it. If you had to make one change inside of our city jails right now around mental health, what would it be?
Sorry, one change?
If you had to make one change from the Board of Corrections, if you joined the Board of Corrections around mental health, what would it be?
I think probably something that CHS was working towards when I left. We had ideas for 2 units. One was called GATE, which was designed to be a substance use unit, and one was called STEP, which was designed to be a therapeutic housing unit between general population and mental observation. I think those units would have gone a very, very long way towards cohorting groups of individuals who were going to live and work well together, and would have increased access to care because mental health treatment providers would have been able to provide care safely on those units. So those are people who tend to bounce back and forth between general population and mental observation units. They take an enormous amount of resources from Department of Corrections and Correctional Health Services, and having an opportunity to cohort those individuals together and provide care directly on those housing units, I think would have gone a really long way towards creating stability in the mental health population in the jails overall.
Got it. And just a final question here, and then I'll pass over to any colleagues who have questions. Obviously, the city is undertaking an effort here to open up the borough-based jail facilities and newly designed facilities that I would suppose have an opportunity to provide different access to clinical services and mental health services inside the jail facility. Can you talk a little bit about, and I may be wrong about that, by the way, but just curious to see your thoughts on that and where there might be opportunities or what your recommendations would be inside of new facilities about how they might treat mental health differently or how they might provide better care.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. I hope it's an opportunity that we're not going to squander as a city. I think I toured the outposted units that are being developed at Bellevue. They were under construction. They're beautiful. You know, they look like the Norwegian prisons. Everything is wood. There's a lot of natural light. I think that environment makes a really big difference, you know, therapeutically for people who are struggling with mental health crises. I think, you know, there's a lot that we can do in terms of physical plant. The physical infrastructure at Rikers is crumbling. It's just incredibly difficult. One of the questions that you asked in the pre-hearing questions was about getting people to take more advantage of programming. I think I didn't include this in my response, but one issue with programming was that there was nowhere to do it. You know, that there just are no big open spacious rooms where people feel like they can sit around and actually be educated about something or engage in sort of a group therapy. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, you know, physically. I think also having the borough-based jails in the city itself already makes a big difference in terms of visits, in terms of legal access. And I think we do have an opportunity by shrinking, you know, the footprint of each place to really have cultural change. And I think what I would like most to see would be more positive reinforcement. That positive reinforcement, you know, incentives really are not part of DOC's programming. It's really very, you know, punishment-based. You break a rule, you get punished, and I think that really creates a culture of learned helplessness among incarcerated individuals. I really believe that if people had more opportunities to rise to the occasion, to demonstrate that they are able to stay in behavioral control, that they are able to help others, that they are able to sort of participate meaningfully in a community, that they would, you know, if they felt that they were able to earn privileges by doing that. And I think because the borough-based jails are at least an opportunity to sort of start from scratch in some ways, that's something that I would really love to see.
Thank you, and we're joined by Councilmember Salamanca here as well. I actually have one more question. We've heard stories and we've seen high-profile incidents over the last couple of years, certainly in this past year, one of them was in my district, where individuals leaving custody are, you know, essentially sent with I believe is today. You would know, probably have more clarity here, but my recollection is folks leaving with like a need for continued care. Very few places they're getting it. They're sort of released without any sort of plan for care. Some are getting, I think, a 14-day prescription and no continued plan to go beyond that. It seems like there's just like a major gap between in-care and custody. We talk about the PACE units, you talk about other units, they're getting higher staff ratios, they're getting adherence to prescriptions or other treatment that they need. It's an environment where there is a sort of structure and support even even inside the sort of environment we're talking about, and then they are released and released without any of that or very little of that, and sent in some cases to the next address, which might be the Bellevue Men's Shelter on 30th Street or another facility where no prescriptions, no treatment, no continued care, really nothing. It feels like nothing. And maybe predictably, we've seen some high-profile acts where individuals have caused inflicted serious pain and violence on people, have caused major incidents without intensity. But even beyond those incidents, there's individuals who are suffering and aren't getting care. And street, subway, shelters become the de facto place for them to go. Feels that gap is a major challenge for us facing the city, but not being discussed enough. What recommendations do you have to help close that gap?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the housing insecurity piece is really huge, and I think you know, in terms of the reentry services available at Rikers currently, my understanding is that people who have serious mental illness are given a 14-day medication supply and an appointment. So my understanding is that they do actually leave with an appointment within those 2 weeks where they can get engaged into community care. Many of them also have case management services with CRAN, which is a really excellent organization that helps with formerly incarcerated individuals and helps sort of connect them to services. And then, you know, people who do not have serious mental illness, I think, get more like a referral and a 7-day supply of medication. There's always a refill at a pharmacy, so technically it's a full month of medication. And you know, I think recently we also started giving people cell phones to help make sure that they can get connected with those case managers. So I think there have been sort of incremental improvements to try to make sure that people have the support that they need. But I think what's missing is more robust community mental health services where the support can really be wraparound, where, you know, people don't get, you know, a SPOA application that recommends them for supportive housing and then they get on a wait list where it could be 2 years, you know, while they're waiting for a place to live. It's really challenging to do strong, you know, care navigation from a shelter. And I think, you know, expanding supportive housing, expanding not only mental health care, but also programming. There are so few day treatment programs where people with serious mental illness have a place that they can go. You know, Fountain House is the one that is really popular, and I do clinical care at Kings County now. Everybody gets referred to Fountain House, but it's the only place. You know, I think people need not just a place to live and medication, but they need a way to fill their time and a sense that they're connected to people who care about what happens to them so that they can care about what happens to them also. And I think that's, you know, really important for people who don't have strong family connections. So I think, you know, there's been a real sort of pruning away of the inpatient beds. Inpatient stays are very short, and the drop-off, you know, similarly from PACE unit in a jail setting to, you know, referral to a psychiatrist or a therapist in the community is huge. Similarly, after a 2-week stay where you're being treated for an acute exacerbation of schizophrenia in a hospital, and then you leave and you're going to a community mental health clinic where you get to see a therapist once every 3 weeks and a psychiatrist once every 2 months, it's not enough. And so, you know, I think creating more robust community mental health services, residential treatment, things like that in the city would be, you know, the right sort of direction to go, if that makes sense.
Got it. Appreciate it. Thanks for answering those questions. Do you have colleagues have questions? Yeah. Councilor Salmon, go ahead.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Welcome and congratulations on the nomination.
Thank you.
So I represent the South Bronx. There is a borough-based jail that is coming to my, it's not my district, it's the border of my district. It's in Councilmember Ayala's district. What role do you see yourself playing in this borough-based jail, given the fact that I don't see it being completed in 2027 or 2028?
I think it would be great to be able to be involved in the planning, to be able to do walkthroughs of the footprint, to be able to speak with DOC leadership about what the plans are for both the physical plant and then also the programming that's going to be offered there, to meet with the individuals from DOC leadership who are going to be in charge of that facility. And I would also be interested in speaking with, you know, community stakeholders in the area about what kinds of things they're concerned about a jail, you know, coming to their neighborhood.
All right. Well, it's challenging because the community doesn't want it. That's for sure. But it was something that is they're getting against their will, and it's unfortunate because directly across the street from that borough-based jail, the administration put in a 2,200 men migrant shelter there. So it's a very hot topic in that immediate area. Does your position have oversight over the juvenile detention centers as well?
I don't know the answer to that.
Chair, do we know?
Does the DOC have? Yes.
They do.
The two juvenile facilities, they do. Yes.
Right. So I have a juvenile detention center in my district called Horizons Detention Center. Once I'm pretty sure you're going to be okay. You will get appointed. I would love to have a conversation or even have a walkthrough with you because we are having issues at the Horizon Detention Center in the South Bronx. And it's a concern. And it's all in the same community board. Community Board 1. So they have reasons why they're upset with all these services coming in with the opioid issue that they have. And on top of that, they are one of the community boards with the most homeless shelters in the entire city of New York. Finally, I'll leave you with this. There was a floating jail in my council district called the Barge, the Vernon C. Bain Center. And I'm happy that the administration decommissioned it, and we're going to give that land back to the community. But ultimately, I think that, what the concerns that we have here is, closing down Rikers is a priority for us. What we're going to do with that land, it's something that, I guess is a land use matter issue, and we have to move forward with that. But I think that as a commissioner, it's important that the commission constantly have communications after the jail is built. I would say the first 5 to 10 years to settle the community, because there's an anger, there's a fear that crime is going to increase. I don't think crime is going to increase. I think crime is going to decrease having that facility there. But the reality is that community for years has been dumped on, and having this facility being brought into that community and yet not real infrastructure being brought in is a major issue. And it's just something that I think you should have in mind as you assume this position.
Yeah, I appreciate you explaining that, and I think, feeling dumped on, I think, is certainly something that folks at Rikers talk about a lot also, and that's a terrible feeling, to feel that you don't have agency and the ability to sort of control your environment, and so I certainly can empathize with that, and I think speaking with communities about, what is it about having this facility here that makes you feel scared or makes you feel concerned about increasing crime rates. I think certainly the goal for everyone is to make the city safer, so I'd be happy to speak with you more about it.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question on how you perceive your role being, at least coming from the mental health perspective into this board, how you hope to facilitate larger conversations and dialogue around where we'd hope to see some of the policies implemented. If you've already kind of seen from outside looking in how the board functions and how members or member priorities are able to be motivated or utilized, and what you see in either a passive or proactive, reactive way. From your specific perspective, I was super appreciative of a lot of your responses to your questionnaire. I thought they were really intentional and deliberate, and also future forward with where I think this body particularly would like to see the Department of Corrections go. So I'd love to hear just your perspective on that.
I hope I can answer this question adequately. I mean, I think my insight into sort of the inner workings of the Board of Corrections is pretty limited. As an outsider, I think we were really appreciative of the efforts that they made to try to be proactive about COVID, asking for a plan, trying to sort of get accountability that steps of the plan were being followed. I like that model of sort of saying, we'd like your leadership to get together and bring us a plan. I'd like to see that done with things like violence reduction and something related to a culture change for the borough-based jails, a plan to make sure that we're not repeating some of the same mistakes that have been sort of ongoing at Rikers. I certainly think it's important to listen before you start to talk. So, I have my own ideas about what I'd like to see, but I'd like to get more of an understanding of what the board is prioritizing right now, and what they're thinking of as being sort of major issues, what the culture is sort of among the board members and where there are tensions. I think certainly there have been sort of tense relationships between the board and DOC at points over the last several years, and I think nothing gets done without a collaborative working relationship, so I'd like to try to sort of do a little bit of a needs assessment before, jumping in.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Our next public hearing for today will be on the designation by the Council of Patricia Marthone for reappointment by the Mayor to the Health and Hospitals Corporation. You may join us up here on the dais. Marthone, the right pronunciation?
Yes, Marthone, yes.
Marthone, okay. She was first designated, well, first of all, welcome, congratulations.
Thank you.
Ms. Marthone, is that right? Yeah.
It's actually Dr. Marthone.
Oh, doctor, oh, sorry,
Yes.
doctor, sorry, apologies. Dr. Marthone, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Dr. Marthone was first designated by the council in 2021 to serve the remainder of a 5-year term that expired on March 20th, 2023. She's been serving in holdover capacity since then. If designated by the council and reappointed by the mayor, she will serve the remainder of a 5-year term to expire on March 20th, 2028. The New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, commonly known as HHC or H&H, was constituted pursuant to Chapter 1016 of the laws of 1969 as a public benefit corporation whose purposes are to provide and deliver high quality, dignified, and comprehensive care and treatment for the ill and infirm, both physical and mental, particularly to those who can at least afford such services, extend equally to all served comprehensive health services of the highest quality in an atmosphere of human care and respect, promote and protect as both innovator and advocate the health, welfare, and safety of the people of the state of New York and the city of New York, and join with other health workers and communities in a partnership to promote and protect health in its full sense, the total physical, mental, and social well-being of the people. As provided by law, a board of directors consisting of 16 members administers HHC. The law establishing HHC provides that of the 16 members, the following officials or their successors shall be ex officio members: the Administrator of the Health Services Administration, the Commissioner of Health, the Commissioner of Mental Health, Administrator of the Human Resource Administration, the Deputy Mayor and City Administrator. 10 additional directors are appointed by the mayor, 5 of whom are designated by the City Council. The president of HHC serves as the 16th director. Term of director, other than those serving ex officio or at the pleasure of the board, is for 5 years. Mayor shall fill any vacancy which may occur by the reason of death, resignation, or otherwise in a manner consistent with the original appointment. The directors do not receive compensation for their services, but are reimbursed for actual and necessary expenses incurred by them in the performance of their official duties. I want to welcome Dr. Marthone, and when you're ready, you may raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and in answer to all council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on your nomination, and you may give an opening statement.
Good morning, Chair Keith Powers, Honorable Diana Ayala, Honorable Amanda Ferraris, Honorable Selvena Brooks Powers, and Honorable Justin Brennan. Thank you for having me here today. As Health and Hospital Corporation, H&H means a lot to me. Representing the borough of Brooklyn on the board of directors has given me the privilege to extend my hand to care for our families, our friends, our neighbors, and even strangers with dignity and love. When I came to you in 2021, I spoke on my father being a paranoid schizophrenic and how my subconscious envisions him being reflected in every unhoused person that may appear to be suffering from mental health issues that cross my path. My concerns for our city's unhoused and mentally ill transected with possible services H&H has had to offer, and was one of my focuses. I promised to be a board member that would be present in every way and to bring my personal experiences and intentionality for positive growth in the execution of mission and purpose on the H&H board. In my tenure on the board, I personally visited our mobile programs, providing care to unhoused New Yorkers, our housing programs and services, our hospitals, our clinics, our nursing homes, and attended public forums to hear concerns brought to our H&H board directly from the public, all to ensure the understanding of what we are doing well or not, and demanding reevaluation, revision, accountability, and follow-up reporting. I want you to know the tireless efforts and work of those assigned to the reception of new arrivals were doubly true to our mission and delivered medical care, housing, and comfort with grace and kindness. My fellow board members and I are constantly searching to produce better outcomes in maternal health and mental health. For example, through the lens of a special committee, we examined maternal health issues to ensure all the derived care and affected outcomes were being addressed, and decisions identifying challenges with geolocation and access to quick interventions for physical and mental crises led to immediate action to understand and remove barriers in real time to create a plan for a permanent solution. I am honored and humbled for the continued opportunity to serve our city in this capacity. As in my time on the H&H board, the dedication and sincerity for improving outcomes in physical and mental health in New York City's population are best reflected upon the words of John Green. He openly shares his struggles with severe anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder and wrote in his novel, Looking for Alaska, "We need never be hopeless because we can never be irreparably broken." I might add, when we have H&H. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I just want to do a few questions to go ahead. Just wanted to check, I know you're an executive vice president of 1199, representing employees within H&H. Have you asked for guidance from the Conflicts of Interest Board just about how you might do your job alongside doing H&H?
Thank you for that question, and absolutely. Initially, when I was appointed last time, I was on the verge of changing titles,
Okay.
and that was brought up to them that I was switching this to this title. And what I represent are community-based organizations and pharmacies like Rite Aid and Walgreens, which do not intersect with this at all. And if ever I am in the room or I know something's on the calendar to be discussed that might just potentially somehow, even minutely, intersect with 1199, I would remove myself from that conversation completely.
Got it. I appreciate that. Just in your experience here so far, and as looking ahead, can you, and many of us who cherish our public health institutions, I'm proud to represent Bellevue Hospital in my district. My mom was a nurse there growing up, and know how important it is to providing care to our whole city, and in addition to my community. Can you just talk about what you see right now as just the largest challenges facing our public health care system here in the city?
I would say mental health. One, it's very difficult to retain public health, psychiatrists or psychologists who are going to help in the treatment of care, and because of that, it is hard to schedule. Even those that would appear for their appointments have trouble, getting an appointment that would be done in a timely manner. So therefore, people that are receiving treatment are receiving it over time more distantly than normally would. Two, those that are unhoused and homeless have challenges accessing that care as well. We do have some show vans that do provide care in the community, but it needs to be close to where they are, and we do not have necessarily all of the resources possible to have show vans in every area of New York City. But increasing those would be helpful, so that those individuals that do receive those 14-day prescriptions when they do go to the emergency room for care have a place closer to them to go and get those refilled, and can be sent directly to the pharmacy. But they have to know where the van is. The van can go looking for them, but it's obviously it's not easy. So it would be great to have more of those so that they can quickly access that. The third thing with the challenge is, and I'm very sympathetic to this issue, is having sometimes to, against one's will, have you brought into the hospital for care. Sometimes it's for the safety of the individual and the public, and to me it just must be done with compassion, and I think we can do more and do better to make sure everyone involved in that interaction with that individual knows how to de-escalate to the utmost of their ability and handle them with care and compassion until we can get them back on track.
Thanks for that. And obviously that issue is top of mind for a lot of folks right now, and I know our state legislature and others discussing exactly whether there should be a change or recalibration around some of those policies and laws. What changes do you see within the care system and also within the commitment laws that would be necessary or helpful to make sure individuals get the care they deserve?
I mean, I will be very frank with you. I do understand why the city pivoted the way we did to try to make sure that individuals that were going through crises that would not cooperate in their own care would directly be brought in for a path to care. And I don't believe that's the best of all ways to do business with individuals in mental health crises. But having had a father that suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, I fully and completely understand why that happens and why it must be done. I believe that, again, and I'm going to go back to my previous statement, trying to increase the training, and I know we've done different things in New York with training police officers and everything, but trying to really increase the training of all individuals involved in that would be very helpful. The other thing is, some of the panic that happens in these emergency situations come from the families and the friends that find the person in crises. And I believe us doing better in terms of public health announcements around mental health and how people can activate help before it's too late or before it gets too far is very important and something we should truly consider embarking on.
Thanks. Obviously, there's a lot of anxiety and nervousness right now about the state of federal funding on many of our healthcare institutions, whether they're private or public institutions here. Can you share with us any insights so far or any thoughts on how federal changes are going to or might impact the ability to provide care at H&H?
Sure, I think it's going to affect CMS greatly, which will affect us in New York. You know, it's unfortunate that, as is the reimbursement for Medicaid, Medicaid is not high enough, that we're getting 70% on the dollar. And we would be looking to increase that versus decreasing that, but it will decrease. And I think H&H has done a good job in trying to, despite what happens with the federal government, despite what happens to contributions that they can get from any source, try to provide equal care for all as much as possible. And I've seen them, in my tenure, levy what they have to try to treat as many people as we can, and as well as we can. Am I concerned that that's not going to happen, you know, when the money starts to dwindle? I think we've been in crises before, and we know how to handle ourselves independent of the federal government.
Yep, thanks. And in your experience, what are changes that you would like to see happen within our public health care system right now, how we provide care to individuals? Obviously, our H&H is the backbone of so many of our healthcare institutions here, in healthcare in the city, providing care to, whether it's our emergency workers here who might get hurt or injured on the job, or worse, to, ordinary New Yorkers who need that safety net. It's critical, and we're joined by Councilmember Brewer here as well. So any thoughts on ways to improve services and care and things you'd like to see happen during your tenure as on the board?
I'm going to go back to mental health. I think mental health with H&H, being able to improve on our services and access to the daily therapy and psychiatrists would be of benefit to all of New York City. I think some of the challenges people face with even their teens and not being able to resolve those issues fast enough because they don't have access to having those evaluations done and then treatment plans is problematic for us in New York, let alone the adult that has had mental illness their whole life and did not or has not understood or felt good in a very long time to be able to maintain their own health in that status. To not have that continuous access to mental health providers is a great problem in the field. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault, because I believe this is a problem straight across the United States right now. But whatever we can do to encourage people to come and be part of our solution, I would highly suggest we do that. I mean, I don't know if you are aware or not that we do use every mode and method that we can to engage individuals. They do online treatment, they do everything they possibly can, but it's still not enough, and that's unfortunate. So we do need to move that needle as far as we can to also help people stay unhoused and off the street that have mental illness as well.
Great. Well, thank you. Congratulations on your nomination. Questions, Councilmember Brewer?
Thank you. I've been listening online. I teach at Hunter College this morning, and actually mental health comes up from the students about all the challenges they face. My question is just, and I don't think it got asked, if it did, tell me, correctional health at Rikers, 50 beds at Bellevue, some at Woodhall, some in the Bronx. Does that come up? Is it happening? Do you have any discussion about that on the board, about these beds? Because they're very slow in coming online.
Forgive me if I don't say something that I think maybe I'm not allowed to say that I know is public, but I do believe that, one, these are services that are increasing because there are spaces being built out for them. But other than that, I do not know if I can speak to any other interaction. I do know they exist, and I do know that we have that. Please forgive me for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks for being with us. Next question. Our next public hearing will be on a nomination for the City Planning Commission pursuant to sections 31 and 192 of the New York City Charter. In a letter dated May 18, 2025, Public Advocate Jumaane Williams requested the City's Council's advice and consent for the proposed reappointment of Leah Goodridge, a resident of Brooklyn, to serve a 5-year term as member of the City Planning Commission. Before I introduce the candidate, I'll review the functions and membership qualifications of the CPC. If reappointed, Ms. Goodridge will serve a 5-year term beginning on July 1st, 2025, expiring on June 30th, 2030. The City Planning Commission is responsible for the conduct of planning relating to the orderly growth, improvement, and future development of the city, including adequate and appropriate resources for the housing, business, industry, transportation, distribution, recreation, culture, comfort, convenience, health, and welfare of its population. The CPC is also responsible for the review of and has veto power over all proposals to change the zoning map, the city map, and the text of the zoning resolution, site selections for city capital projects, all major concessions, proposed franchises, and revocable consents. The Department of City Planning determines would have land use impacts, proposed housing and urban renewal plans pursuant to state and federal law, sales, acquisitions, leases, or other dispositions of real property of and by the city, and the granting of special permits pursuant to the zoning resolution. CPC oversees the implementation of laws that require environmental reviews of actions taken by the city, in particular, City Environmental Quality Review, State Environmental Quality Review Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act. The CPC assists the mayor and other officials in developing the 10-year capital strategy, the 4-year capital program, as well as the annual statement of needs, and is also responsible for various rules, including establishing the minimum standards for certification of applications subject to the Uniform Land Use Review process, commonly known as ULURP, establish the minimum standards and procedural requirements for community boards, borough presidents, borough boards, and commission itself in the exercise of their duties and responsibilities in ULURP, establishing specific time periods for pre-certification review of applications subject to ULURP, establishing procedures for environmental reviews required by law, and the preparation of environmental assessment statements and environmental impact statements, establishing the minimum standards for the form and content of 197A plans, and listing major concessions or establishing a procedure for determining whether a concession is defined as a major concession. Also has the power to modify any amendments proposed by the mayor to change rules governing site selection and the fair distribution of city facilities. And it has CPC has exclusive power to propose additional categories of land use actions to be reviewed pursuant to ULURP, subject to enactment by the council. City Planning Commission consists of 13 members, with the chair and 6 other appointments made by the mayor, 1 by the public advocate, and 1 by each borough president. Members are to be chosen for their independence, integrity, and civic commitment. Appointments of all members except the chair are subject to the advice and consent of the City Council. CPC members, except for the chair, who serves at the pleasure of the mayor, serve for 5-year staggered 5-year terms, which begin the day after expiration of the previous term. For purposes of Chapter 68 of the Charter, CPC members other than the chair should not be considered regular employees of the city and are prohibited from holding any other city office while they serve on the CPC. There's no limitation on the number of terms a member may serve. The member who is served as vice chair receives an annual salary of $73,855. The other members receive an annual salary of $64,224. Leah Goodrich has been a member of the City Planning Commission since first appointed by the Public Advocate in 2021. Welcome and congratulations on your reappointment. Please raise your right hand to be sworn in.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee and in response to all council member questions?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You can offer an opening statement if you like.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the City Council. I am honored to be nominated for reappointment to the City Planning Commission, which I've been on for about the last 4 years. Before joining the City Planning Commission, I spent at least a decade as a tenants' rights attorney, and I listened to the stories of New Yorkers who were facing eviction, why they were facing eviction and being pushed out of the city. And by the time that I joined the City Planning Commission, where most of the work surrounds housing, most of the proposals are housing proposals by private developers, that really informed a lot of my information on voting on these proposals. So my focus has been housing affordability. When these proposals come before us, sometimes they are for $3,000 low-income studios. And the first thing I think about are the clients that I represented and whether they can afford them. And almost none of them can. I can't afford a $3,000 studio. So for my focus for the last 4 years, and if reappointed for the next 5, would be on housing affordability and amplifying what happens in the very complex procedures of city planning. So I am honored again to be here and also to talk a bit more about city planning, and I hope to be reappointed.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today, and congratulations on the renomination. On the topic of I think we all appreciate the advocacy around affordability, and we know that for many New Yorkers, that studio at $3,000 is unattainable, even for some dual income homes, 2-income homes, still a value in space proposition that doesn't make a lot of sense. Can you talk more about? But and recognizing each project is specific, has its own specifics and its unique, unique details. Whether it's like literally the financing of the project to get there, or the location of the project, or what makes sense. When we talk about affordability, and when it comes to the City Planning Commission for approval or rejection, what is it like? What is the goal around affordability?
What is the?
What is the goal of affordability when it comes to talking about? We know what the specifics that we know may not be attainable for folks, like the example you mentioned, but some examples that might make sense when it comes to trying to approve a project based on exceeding or achieving affordability levels.
Well, I think I'd like to point to some of the factors that don't work, so that we can look to what we should do moving forward. One of them is that the income requirements for affordable housing at this point need really to be reviewed. They're based on the MIH formula, which is also follows HUD. And so, for example, if you are making 6 figures, $130,000, you can qualify for one person, for yourself, for affordable housing in New York City. I think we need to review that.
You think it's too high or too low?
I think it's too high. And I think that some people will say, well, that's middle income technically in New York City, we need that. But from where I sit, we also have a very huge homelessness crisis that we've been battling for many decades, do not have a handle on it. And a big part of that is because of lack of affordable housing. Only 16% of the low-income or affordable apartments under the Adams administration have been for extremely low income. So there's a real problem of having affordable apartments that actually are not affordable. So there's the income requirements, and then the income requirements also inform the actual rent. So we have these people think I'm joking when I say that there literally are $3,000 studios. We just had one with, in Brooklyn. There was a huge fight in Brooklyn where residents were challenging a developer's proposal to build a taller building, And that building, because of its height of 14 stories, would have impacted sunlight for the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And so this is a treasured and beloved garden that has been there for many years, and so residents fought it. And my question, of course, that we were, a lot of the proposals there was, well, let's look at the housing. We need more housing. So if it may impact the garden, let's look at the fact that it would still bring in housing. So I immediately asked, how much is the housing? It's $3,000, the studio, and a literal studio for $3,030. So this is a real problem that we have to fix in the city. I think for me, the actual rent under these studios, the fact that 30% is based off of gross income, so by the time you take out taxes, we're still talking about someone paying $2,000 for a studio, and their actual take-home pay may not be $80,000, it may be more like $60,000. So it just doesn't work, and I think that we really need to address it. Even when we have projects, to sum up, that they're 25% of the units are affordable, this is a big part of why we have these fights, because when you look at those actual 25% of affordable units, most of them are for moderate income. Most of them are studios and one-bedrooms. One Gothamist article said 70% of the Adams administration's affordable apartments have been studios and one-bedrooms. This is a real problem, and this is why we have these very controversial projects.
Is there a part of that equation that you think is a higher priority? Is it the income requirements, the rents, or the size of the apartments? Because all three, I agree. I think we are doing a lot of studios. We are doing a lot. That seems the way the market is right now, and I think we all can look at all the above. But I think also sometimes recognize the challenges in these projects, trying to figure out the right calibration of it. Is there a specific part of that would you note those three things that you feel is the one that really sticks out the most?
One reform that we can do is to reform MIH. It is not based on the specific area income. Instead, it is including income from the suburbs, from parts outside of New York City. So that raises the income requirements. So for example, I grew up in Brownsville, and it's a very low income area. But instead of the actual income, they call it area median income of that area, it will be a little bit higher than what is the income for that particular community. So we end up with an area median income that's higher than most of the New York City neighborhoods in of itself. So then if we say the area median income is at 80%, it's still higher than whatever that neighborhood is. So I think that that's one part that we can look at.
Are you proposing that we take the suburbs out of that formula, or that we take?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Got it. I want to talk about CDVS. How did you? I think you voted against CDVS, or you just supported it?
I voted against it.
You voted against it. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts and reasoning on your vote for that?
There were lots of reasons why I voted against it, but I will focus on affordability. This is a housing plan, and as I described before, the main, let me back up and say that I'm a very public-facing commissioner, so I'm out in the community, I'm talking to people, and the main thing that people say to me when they say, oh, you're a commissioner, what about Housing Connect, those apartments on there? What's the city doing about affordability? So now we have the city of Yes in a housing plan, and most people are expecting, as am I, for it to focus on affordability. But the affordability piece was, I would say, probably the smallest piece. The affordability piece was more of a preference of if you're a developer and you want to build additional units, and that part has to be affordable. I thought that the other parts of the plan, often we have this phrase in urban planning, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I didn't think that the rest of the plan really made up for that very small piece. It's not, for me, really a housing plan. If we are going to have the end result of building housing everywhere, then we do need more safeguards for that housing to be affordable. One of the things that I strongly reject is the notion that affordability is simply addressed by building more housing, that the city itself doesn't need to do any more than that. Just build housing and that takes care of affordability. That is a proposition that is based on the private market, and I don't feel like it's acceptable for the government to accept that. There are many things, especially that's going on in the city, where rent stabilization is being attacked, where, as I just described, we're not building enough deeply affordable units, that the government can be proactive about. So I don't feel like I think that one of the undergird of City of Yes is build more housing, and that is the actual affordability piece. And I just didn't feel like that was acceptable.
Thanks. And we're joined by Councilmember Brooks Powers as well. Isn't there a different way to look at it? And isn't it that you're at city planning, you're tending to like the zoning and the zoning text and the land use actions. HPD is doing the subsidies and the part around attacking affordability. And, HDC is over here, and you have like a multi-agency set around DHS has to do a part of affordability. And the kind of core central of city planning is a question of like, what gets built, how big should it be, and should we allow for more? And in that context, if you're talking about 25%, 30%, whatever the other normal mandates are, doing a little bit more means you also get a little more of the affordable piece of that component too. And then, HPD, and this is what we fought for in the council, HPD has to deliver more, we have to deliver money for HPD so they can get projects done, and we have the available resources to make them more subsidy. We go to Albany to make sure we can strengthen our rent regulation laws, but kind of core to city planning is sort of what gets built and what should be allowed to be built. In this case, in places like Manhattan, we're talking about a little bit more density to accommodate a little more few more people. You can debate the logistics around whether that drives the prices down, but it certainly would allow a little more affordable housing to be built, and certainly a little more just housing to be built in the city. And that's kind of what the city planning's sort of piece of this equation is. How do you respond to that?
Okay, let me accept that proposition for the purpose of this hypothetical. Let's just say that city planning commissioners are there to rubber stamp development, and then the fights that happen, the social conversations about affordability that happens elsewhere at the city council. This is part of the problem, that people don't trust the city planning commission and the government. This is something that comes up very frequently when people testify at the city planning commission. They flat out say, you guys are just here to rubber stamp everything. You guys don't ever say no. You guys don't hear us. People come and testify. Half of the time they're talking about affordability, the other time they're talking about traffic and congestion. And this is what they say. You guys are just appointed to just rubber stamp stuff for the mayor. There's no checks and balances. No one's talking about the fact that we can't afford any of this stuff.
But most of the opponents of City of Yes were not debating about affordability. They were debating
Yes,
around
they were.
parking and ADUs and other issues, which I don't have represent those areas. I think a lot of the main issues that were being discussed, I know in the council and other places, were about. So did you?
I just have to push back on that. The opponents of City of Yes were pushing back because of affordability. Specifically, most people testified, and also outside of City of Yes, the specific idea is this, and I'm going to put it in quotes here because this is what's being said, that this city is being bought by developers. That is literally what the pushback is, that this city is being taken over by developers and that the government is allowing it to happen. That's what people are saying. And especially in this climate.
But people can say it. The
I'm
question
sorry?
is whether it is true. And the question is whether people can say anything they want. And we get a lot of things said to us often. I guess the question is what's true and what's not at the end of the day.
Well, if commissioners are rubber stamping things and don't raise affordability and should just look at things as, is the building tall enough, then it is true.
Well,
That's the
I think the term rubber stamp versus should we allow and accommodate more where things are being built today I think it's a different story. I certainly think in the question you raised around the botanical garden and things like that, those raise issues around like how the physical design impacts the rest of the neighborhood and things like that. And I don't take this at all to mean that affordability shouldn't be part of the conversation. And certainly, I think there is a criticism often that by the time, it kind of moves through it comes to the council before it really gets to the sort of hard conversations around affordability, and it's sort of on a tight timeline to be able to really accommodate that conversation. So I take that to heart, and I agree with much of what's being said. I wanted to ask, but I do want to ask a second question. That example around the middle income 130,000 studio example, for that person who you take away, if the adjustment here is to take away MIH and to not allow them to be part of the MIH program, and also we're not allowing for new housing to be built in various different places around the city, which was what CDBS was getting at. What do we do with that 130,000? That person who's making 130K a year, who is working a job, maybe working for the city, and doesn't have a place here, because it feels like that is also a group of people that are losing their path here in the city. And you can go higher than 130K, I think, to even get there. I'm not saying it should be priority number one or priority number two, but I certainly think that there's also like people are saying that also, that like there's a deep feeling like that sort of middle portion is really losing their path to affording Manhattan, Brooklyn, many other parts of the city right now, especially as they change over rapidly. What do we do about those? It's an earnest question. I'm just asking, what do we do about that if we take away like MIH and other programs for them?
Well, I think one of the things as a city that we should look at moving forward is how do we build more affordable home ownership? I am a product of growing up in a Mitchell-Lama in Brooklyn, in Brownsville. And when I was growing up, people had options of get a Nehemiah house, other types of affordable home ownership. I was having a conversation recently with a fellow commissioner about the fact that these opportunities are just not as ample as they were years ago, because it's just is not a priority. There was an op-ed in City and State by 3 city council members specifically about this issue and pushing for more home ownership, affordable home ownership. We look at Parkchester, for example. There are ways to collaborate with private developers and not have it, the end result just be, like I described, $3,000 studios. We can have affordable home ownership. So we have communities like Parkchester, Co-op City, many communities that are co-ops and other types of homes for middle-income New Yorkers, because everyone, I'm a tenants' rights advocate, I'm unapologetic about that. I'm a tenant myself. I was on the Rent Guidelines Board for 4 years, so this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. I also grew up in New York City, not with a silver spoon in my mouth, so this is something that is not, it relates to me personally. So I think, for people who want to move out of tenancy and want to be able to buy a home, that opportunity is few and far between today. And that's a direction that I think the city should move towards. I was hoping that when we talked about a housing plan, that would be part of it.
Got it. Appreciate that, and thank you. And a big fan of the Mitchell-Lama program as well. My last question I wanted to hand over to colleagues here as well is, I have 2 questions. One is, on the specifics of Rent Guideline Board, something I testify every year in front of my constituents, and a maddening process every year. What if you had to make any changes to Rent Guidelines Board process, what would it be? And second is, that was just a thought I had in my head. And the second one is, what changes to the land use process would you propose? If we have a Charter Revision Commission before us, a lot of discussion around that right now, sitting on the City Planning Commission. Curious to see if any thoughts around how you would change the land use process if given the ability to do so.
Thinking about the first question, the rent
You can
changes to
forget it.
the-
You can do the second one if you want.
Okay, the Charter Review Commission, I have to be honest, the way I found out about the Charter Review Commission was that a journalist contacted me and asked me about it, and I contacted fellow commissioners, like, is there a Charter Review Commission? And we all said, no, that would be wild because no one has told us. So I think that that's important to note for transparency. One thing that could change is the level of transparency. There have been a few times where something's happening like Green Fast Track or something else going on with the mayor's proposals that actual city planning commissioners and other people just aren't looped in, and we're part of the process of city planning. So I think that that could change. One thing I've been working on as a commissioner to change that in terms of transparency is I created a project in collaboration with the Brooklyn Public Library where I lead workshops and invite other commissioners and elected officials to come and talk about the process of city planning. I find that people are coming to the hearings to talk about specific proposals, but we're not having conversations in a larger context about what's happening with city planning, which can be very opaque, it can be very complex, and so I think it's important to have these conversations where people describe, especially experts in the field, describe what's happening in New York City and get feedback. Not, replacing a hearing, but just describing what's happening and opening it up. I think this might be the first type of program, if I'm not mistaken, that has done so. I also, as a commissioner, I publish op-eds quite often to explain a bit more about what's happening with urban planning. A recent one was in the New York Times about a city council bill for free public restrooms. Mm-hmm. That's an urban planning issue because the reason why, most people will say, yeah, we should have public restrooms, and then they pause, and then the reason why they pause is they're getting to the next big issue, which is, well, if they're open to, what about homeless people? And then that's why they don't want public restrooms. So that's where I come in with my experience with housing and as a commissioner to explain and to amplify these issues and to really get at the many nuances of the history of urban planning. So to answer your question, I think transparency, one of the things that we can do different with land use is more transparency all around, not just transparency with commissioners sitting on the commission, but transparency with the public and explaining the process and having, providing more access.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, and congratulations on your renomination.
Thank you.
Questions with Councilmember Brewer and then Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you very much. I certainly agree with everything that you said. One question I would have about, as the chair said, about the ULURP plan would be, years ago, I've been around for a long time, and the 197A plan used to work. Community boards would do their own planning. Community Board 4 did an excellent one. They went to every single lot in Board 4 and determined what should happen there. Again, getting people, city planning and everyone else to listen to that plan is a problem. But it would seem to me that one suggestion, we should go back to that and have the community boards with enough staff be able to do some planning on their own. Would that be something that you would think would be helpful to you as a commissioner?
It would be very helpful. One of the things I can, just to provide some insight as a commissioner, we get so many proposals that oftentimes the thing that red flags commissioners to say, oh, this is a proposal that, this is a bit different, is when we see a community board has voted no. So, we have the borough president's recommendations, but sometimes a community board has voted no, the borough president has voted yes, and so we say, well, what's going on here? Or sometimes both have voted no. And so we take a look and we say, what's going on here? So the community board informs a lot of commissioners, because sometimes, even as a native New Yorker, we might not have the opportunity to go into every single neighborhood to see what's happening. So they're also describing oftentimes in their assessment, for example, I have been to Bay Ridge quite a bit, but I haven't been in a number of years. And we've had proposals where community boards will explain there's a real parking situation. And so if you have this big apartment building, let me describe the fact that it can take an hour to move with 3 blocks because it's so congested. So just having that visual as a commissioner for me and someone from the community board, those can be helpful. So I can attest to the fact that I rely a lot on community boards to inform specific neighborhoods and what's happening in ways that maybe an individual commissioner might not have gone to the neighborhood in a bit. And for many other commissioners, it is incredibly helpful and insightful.
Okay, just so you know, there are 2 charter revision commissions right now, even more transparent, not. One, the speaker, I didn't know about the speakers, I must admit, now I testified there, and then we're gonna be testifying at the mayor, so it's very crazy for the public even to understand this. So you're not alone in the transparency problem. On the public restrooms, I wanted to say years ago, the problem is not only people worrying about the homeless, nobody wants one in their neighborhood. So we had plans many years ago under Bloomberg, and they went bye-bye because he couldn't find a place to put them. So it's, thank goodness for your op-ed, but it's endless. The other thing is just the Mitchell-Lama program was the best housing program ever conceived. And so what's frustrating to me with city planning, because it's supposed to be planning, is that obviously the state has to okay a Mitchell-Lama 2.0 or whatever it would be. But, you know, city planning, like this chair said, HTC, HFA, HPD, everybody should be talking about this. I always think we're operating in silos, and that's one of our problems. In other words, you could do the planning, but there's no money, no support for the, in my opinion, also for the lower AMIs, then, you know, what are we doing? So does that kind of non-silo discussion come up, or is it just we're going to plan the way we don't need to talk to anybody else?
So I'm going to be brutally honest. There are silos.
I know.
There are silos, which is kind of why I had a very strong response. I hope you felt it was respectful, but this is kind of why I had a strong response, because this is something that, as a commissioner, I would say that is my biggest challenge, and this is part of why I've become like very public-facing to just go out into the community and have these conversations. There is and the question is like, well, what do you do as a commissioner? Do you just go and say, I'm just going to vote and purely look at this as like text amendment and let me see if the building is tall enough and let me just rubber stamp it, and if there's a fight, then the city council will take it over from there? And I've just decided that that's not the approach that I want to have.
Yeah, I mean, we do operate in silos, and you're supposed to be the planning agency, so you'd think that the silos could in fact be stopped to a certain extent or curtailed at CPC. I'm not saying it happens, I'm just saying that would be the wish.
Well, I think, the agencies do work with one another.
Yeah.
DCP, HPD, and DOT, the agencies do work with one another. When I say silos, I just want to clarify, then there's the commission, and then there's sort of the expectation of like, what do you do if you want to address these sort of larger issues that are part of city planning, like the AMI? Then there's a stuck part there of like, well, what do you do? Other than raising hell about it on the commission, what do you do? What can we do? We would have to advocate for there to be some change apart from the commission. So I think that's the part where because the big part for me is affordability and a host of other issues. And then there's this sort of like sentiment of, well, you just vote on them and that's it.
Okay.
So I to address the silos, I think it would be great if there would be an effort between the commissioners, DCP, a host of other agencies, to just have a comprehensive plan.
Right. I would totally agree with that. I mean, even just the buying out of all of these Mitchell-Lamas, that was a decision that was made understandably. You invest, your time is up, your 6% is paid, you can get out. Oh, that's like killing thousands of units of affordable housing. So one last idea that I have, it's not moving, but I want to bring it up, which is Ward's Island is right next to Randall's Island. It's got on it a couple of shelters and the fire department, and it's empty land, vacant land. So it's only vacant land left in Manhattan, really, owned by the city or the state. So it's something to think about. Why can't we do another Roosevelt Island without buying out all the Mitchell-Lamas, which is what happened at Roosevelt Island? So something to think about. We need some big plans, some big ideas, in my opinion. Again, home ownership, Mitchell-Lama, rental Mitchell-Lama, not buying out Mitchell-Lama, that kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that I wish the city planning, I know the city of Yes, I voted for it with some trepidations, to be honest with you. But, you know, it's gonna take forever, and it's also fraught with some of the issues that you brought up. But plans and ideas like that, sometimes they do come from the community, and that's what I'm looking for, so. Any ideas that you bring up around Ward's Island would be great. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to see you in person. I had the opportunity to speak with you and the candidates from earlier ahead of today's hearing. And so I just had a few questions on the record I wanted to ask. The first is focusing on priorities and approach. If reappointed to the City Planning Commission, what would your top priorities be in making housing more affordable for New Yorkers?
Oh yeah, my top priority would be affordability, and to raise it at the commission. One of the things I would like to do moving forward is have a conversation with the public advocate, just about what we can do about MIH, about our current structure for affordability. I don't feel like it's working. Specifically because it's not deeply affordable enough and because of the issues that I raised prior in the hearing. So that's one thing.
No, and I appreciate that. And every time I hear you speak about it, I think about the book also, How to Kill a City. And when it talks about the incentives that are often given to developers, which I personally feel like should be flipped to allow people to be able to cross the hurdles to access the housing, which sometimes is a matter of down payments or, you know, what have you. And it was refreshing to see your response to the question when you talk about City of Yes in terms of the need for the deep affordability and how it wasn't really fully in alignment with the fact that you had to build more to get to access that deep affordability. So because, you know, I think you have voted no on it, how did you see an opportunity that may have been a missed opportunity to have created that deep affordability without having to necessarily build more to get more in terms of affordability?
You know, I'm not against building more. What I voted against was the fact that the affordability piece itself, it just was very thin. So if it had included something with deeper affordability, for example, if we had a plan that said, yeah, we're gonna build more housing, and most of it, at least 50%, for example, is going to be affordable, deeply, and real affordability, not six-figure affordability, I likely would have voted for that. That's a starting point. But there were all of these other, you know, building on, you know, the NYCHA part, for example, there were a lot of questions about that. Building on NYCHA campuses, and then there being questions about whether, first of all, the building on it, and then second of all, the questions of what that affordability would even look like. Then the third, of course, was whether NYCHA residents even were going to be able to vote on this beforehand with all of the issues going on with privatization. I mean, there were just a host of other different issues with City of Yes. But what I'm saying is, I am not against building. What I'm against is this idea that building in of itself, just the building with no actual affordability mandates or no real affordability, that, you know, we can have affordability mandates, they can be six figures. And then that in of itself takes care of affordability. That's what I'm against, that notion. For a city, that's something for private developers to say. That's a supply and demand argument. They're the ones that are going to be building the housing, so they have a vested interest in making this argument. But that is, for me, unacceptable for a city to sort of take. I think it's just a very passive approach in terms of addressing a housing crisis where if you walk 5 blocks anywhere in New York City, you will see homelessness. So I don't think that this is, I don't think that that was enough.
No, and I agree, and thank you for the clarity on it, because that's some of what I was hearing in my district too, because we were often getting painted as being NIMBY, and it was less about that and more about, one, affordability came up, about is it truly affordable? Who is it affordable for? We know the AMI dynamic is not really a good metrics for most communities in New York City either, and it was being pushed or promoted as the more you build, the deeper the affordability, which it is not necessarily like, you know, it may or may not generate. But the next thing I have is in terms of the challenges to home ownership in New York City. So rising home prices, high property taxes, and limited access to financing remain major barriers to home ownership. What role do you believe city planning and land use policy can play in addressing these challenges?
So I was describing that I was very happy to see this op-ed in City and State. I think it was by Councilmember Williams, Felice, and I forgot the third one, but
Riley?
And Riley. And thank you. I was very happy to see this because it essentially argues that through zoning, the city should have an approach to building more affordable home ownerships, and they specifically cite examples. But like I said, you know, the Mitchell-Lama programs were very successful, in my opinion. And we have other, you know, we have HDFCs, we have other types of these programs, but there should be more of an investment into these opportunities. I think there's some state, you know, the Sony Ma program, there's state programs for mortgages and so forth. There's also the HPD one where I believe it's up to $100,000. I think that's incredibly helpful for home ownership. One thing I do hear from people is it's great, you know, but if the home starts at $500K, there are a host of other issues where, for example, you know, people are being bought out by cash buyers. So the whole like get a mortgage era, their competitors are cash buyers right now in the home market. So that's just a whole other problem.
Thank you for that. Just still in alignment in terms of the home ownership piece, balancing density and home ownership. Some housing advocates argue that higher density rezonings, again, like the proposed city of Yes, primarily encourage rental development rather than home ownership. What alternative strategies would you propose to ensure that rezoning efforts also create opportunities for family-sized, owner-occupied housing? And I know you, and some of what I read spoke to, you know, the need to have more than studios and one bedrooms, and that was really good to hear, because oftentimes when developers are coming to me in my district, they're talking about largely studios and one bedrooms. Even when I talk to the seniors in my community that look for senior housing, want no less than a one bedroom to have their dignity when they have people in there. So when we think about housing and families and where they be in place, you know, that is a concern that I continue to hear as well.
It's a huge concern. As I was saying earlier, there's 70% under the Adams administration have been studios and one bedrooms. So one of the things people say when they come and testify is, who is this for? Is this for students? You know, but this, or who, you know, this is not for people from the neighborhood. This is not for families. Even if you're a family with one child, that's at least a 2-bedroom. So we often have this in New York City, and so this goes back to this whole theme of, is the city being just like bought off by developers? Because we're building a business class and not a class for families. So it goes back to providing homeownership opportunities with actual 2 bedrooms and so forth. You know, one of the, you know, there's something that an applicant said recently, because I asked about this. There was a very controversial development that came back, and the developer mentioned, you know, the 3 bedrooms. The community wanted 3 bedrooms. And when it came back, the developer added the 3 bedrooms, but then said that this is not popular. And I don't know that that's particularly true, but at least there's this mindset, I think, amongst developers, I guess, that it's not financially worth it to build 3 bedrooms. I don't know that that's really true. I think people are looking, and that was for rentals. I think people are looking for home ownership opportunities with 3 bedrooms.
No, absolutely. And then my last question in terms of affordable home ownership programs, the city has existing home ownership programs like HPD's Open Door and Home First down payment assistance, but they have often limited funding. Do you believe these programs should be expanded or reformed, and what improvements would you recommend to make them more effective?
I definitely think that they should be expanded. This was the name of I forgot the name of the program that I was mentioning earlier, but this is what people come up to me and say, oh, there's you can get $100,000 of a down payment. So I definitely think that they should be expanded. For improvements, I haven't heard anything, I haven't heard anything negative to recommend an improvement, just that there should be enough funding to continue it.
No, thank you for that. And again, thank you for your service and willingness to serve on the CPC and hearing the voices of the community. I also want to thank you on behalf of my 5 NYCHA developments in my district, the fact that you were willing to center their voices in the process when the conversation came up about building on open lots in NYCHA and saying that their voices should be heard in that. I truly appreciated hearing that, and also just your thoughts around affordability and also home ownership. So thank you and congrats in advance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, you are here. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
so much. Have a great day.
We're now going to take testimony from the public. I'll open the floor to public testimony. We have 1 person signed up right now to testify. Members of the public will have 2 minutes to speak. The first person here I have is Sharon Brown. Yeah, thanks. Okay, thank you. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, my name is Sharon Brown from Rose of Sharon Enterprises. Before I get started, remember the hostages, release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go, defend Israel. So someone was speaking about Rikers Island, mental illness and jails and different things like that. They didn't necessarily get into the elections and things, but Rikers Island must close immediately. The mental health system is failing. It's failing miserably. They have had many years to do what they've been doing, and it culminated in Rikers. And I was instrumental in getting Rikers closed down in 2027. It was actually supposed to close earlier. Now they're trying to delay it. So what is occurring is they've made Rikers Island a big mental health facility. They're telling people that they can't get better, they can't get well. So Rikers Island is declining on that premise that your mental health system is telling people they can't get well. Well, in the church, when we teach people, we teach them you can get well. The Bible says God gave you a sound mind. He gave you peace, love, and a sound mind. So pumping people with medications is not the solution. It's not helping them. Can you show me where it's helping? It's not. Rikers Island is a show that the mental health system is a colossal failure. We need something else. What we're doing is putting the Bible back into schools. We're putting the Bible back everywhere. We want the Bible in classrooms and courthouses. We want people to be in homes, not in mental institutions. Homes for homeless people. If you say they're homeless, they don't need medication, they need homes.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public here to testify today? Okay. Thank you all for all our nominees for being here with us today. Seeing no other people sign up to testify, public hearing on these appointments are closed. Thanks so much.